sources close to the royal household are describing an atmosphere that is deeply strained. And at the centre of it all sits a king who is, by multiple accounts, furious. But what has pushed him to this point? Today I am taking you inside the walls of the palace to examine what is really happening, and above all, we will look at Camilla's leaked response to the escalating situation. Now here is where the story becomes truly extraordinary. While the palace has said nothing publicly, maintaining that wall of careful, practiced silence, sources are telling a very different story behind closed doors. Camilla, Queen Consort, has responded to the escalating situation, but not in the way anyone expected. According to insiders with direct knowledge of the household, Camilla's reaction was not one of submission. It was not one of quiet diplomacy. It was defiant. A source familiar with the matter told a close confidant, later reported in circles I have spent decades cultivating, that Camilla made it unmistakably clear she would not be sidelined. Not now. Not after everything she has sacrificed to stand where she stands today. Think about what that means. This is a woman who spent 30 years being vilified by the British press, despised by a significant portion of the public, and blamed for the collapse of what many considered the most watched marriage in history. She endured it all. She waited. But then something shifted inside the palace, and Camilla, according to those who know her best, decided that waiting was no longer her strategy. She has reportedly confided in a small, trusted circle. Individuals who are not staff, not courtiers, but personal allies she has built quietly over years. What she said to them has now leaked. And it is, in the words of one source, not what the king wanted to hear. The details are striking. Camilla is said to have questioned, privately but pointedly, the way decisions are being made at the very top of the royal household. She is not just reacting, she is positioning. But to understand why Camilla's response has sent shockwaves through the palace, you first need to understand the marriage itself. And the truth is far more complicated than the carefully curated image the palace projects. Charles and Camilla's relationship has never been simple. It has never been easy. It has been forged in scandal, sustained through decades of secrecy, and built on a foundation that the British establishment never fully accepted. What most people don't know is that even before Charles became king, those closest to the couple described their dynamic as one of parallel lives rather than a shared one. They operate differently, they think differently, and crucially, they want different things from the monarchy. Charles has always been driven by legacy, by purpose, by the crushing weight of duty that has defined every single day of his existence since childhood. Camilla, by contrast, is driven by something far more human: comfort, loyalty, survival. Sources who have observed them together in private settings describe a relationship that is warm but increasingly tense. Two people who genuinely care for one another, but who are, right now, pulling in opposite directions. But then the health crisis changed everything. When Charles's cancer diagnosis became public in February 2024, it did not bring the couple closer in the way the palace narrative suggested. It created, according to insiders, a new and unexpected pressure point. Camilla was suddenly thrust into a role she had never prepared for. Not just Queen Consort, but the visible, functioning face of a monarchy whose king could no longer carry the full weight alone. She stepped up. But stepping up came with a cost, and that cost is now becoming impossible to ignore. Here is something the mainstream media is almost entirely ignoring. Because beneath the surface of this royal marriage crisis lies something far more significant, a power struggle, not between Charles and Camilla alone, but between competing factions inside the royal household itself, factions that are right now actively fighting to shape the future of the British monarchy. On one side, you have the old guard, the senior courtiers who have served the crown for decades, men and women who believe the monarchy survives through tradition, restraint, and absolute control of the public narrative. They are Charles's people, deeply loyal to the king's vision, but then on the other side something new has emerged. A quieter, more modern faction, individuals aligned not with Charles's way of doing things, but with a vision of the monarchy that is more visible, more accessible, and more Camilla-shaped than the king would perhaps like to admit. What most people don't realize is that Camilla has, over the past 18 months, built her own informal network of influence inside the palace walls, quietly, strategically. She has cultivated relationships with key household staff, with select members of the media, and with figures in the cultural establishment who can shape public perception in ways that formal royal communications cannot. This is not accidental. This is the behavior of someone who understands that in the world of institutional power, survival belongs to those who build alliances before they need them. And right now, with the king's health uncertain, his temper reportedly volatile, and the succession question looming larger than ever, those alliances are beginning to matter enormously. The courtiers have noticed, and they are not pleased. So what exactly has made King Charles furious? Because this is not simply about a marital disagreement. This is not a domestic dispute that will be resolved over dinner at Highgrove. The anger runs deeper than that. Those who have studied Charles closely, and I have spent years doing exactly that, know that his fury is rarely spontaneous. It builds, it accumulates, it layers itself quietly beneath that composed, dutiful exterior until the pressure becomes impossible to contain. And right now, multiple sources are pointing to 3 specific triggers. The first is Camilla's growing independent profile. Charles, by all accounts, did not anticipate the degree to which his queen consort would develop her own public identity, one that, in certain media circles, is now being portrayed as more sympathetic, more relatable, and more popular than the king himself. That stings. But then the second trigger is far more personal. Sources close to the king describe a specific incident, the details of which remain deliberately vague in public reporting, in which Camilla allegedly made a decision regarding a significant household matter without consulting Charles directly. In the world of the monarchy, where protocol and hierarchy govern everything, that is not a small thing, that is a statement. The third trigger is perhaps the most painful of all. Charles is a man acutely aware of his own mortality right now. His cancer treatment has forced him to confront questions about legacy, about time, and about control, the one thing a king fears losing above all else. And when the person closest to him appears to be operating independently of his authority, that fear transforms into something far less regal. It transforms into fury. But then it happened. The moment that insiders are now describing as the breaking point. According to sources with knowledge of the private dynamics inside the palace, there was a confrontation, not a public one. Not the kind that leaks immediately into the tabloids with conveniently timed photographs and carefully placed anonymous quotes. This was private, behind closed doors, in the way that only the most serious royal conflicts ever are. The atmosphere, according to one individual briefed on the exchange, was described as unlike anything seen in the household in recent memory. What most people don't know is that this confrontation was not the first. It was the culmination. Weeks of tension, weeks of carefully avoided conversations and diplomatic silences had finally compressed into a single, unavoidable moment. Charles reportedly made his position clear, unmistakably clear, in the way that only a king, a man who has been told since birth that his word carries the weight of centuries, knows how to communicate displeasure. But then Camilla did something that nobody in that household expected. She did not retreat. She did not offer the quiet, gracious deference that the situation, and frankly the institution, demanded. She held her ground. Sources describe her response as measured but firm, calm but immovable, the kind of response that communicates without a single raised voice that the balance of power inside this marriage has fundamentally shifted. Think about what that means for an institution built entirely on hierarchy. Think about what it means for a king who is already fighting battles on every front, his health, his heir, his legacy. The confrontation ended, but nothing was resolved, and the palace has not been the same since. But here is the question that matters most. Where does this all go from here? Because what we are witnessing inside Buckingham Palace right now is not simply a royal drama playing out behind closed doors. It is something far more consequential. It is a monarchy in transition, struggling to reconcile the weight of its past with the brutal realities of its present. Charles is a king who arrived at the throne later than any monarch in British history. He is governing while unwell. He is managing a fractured family. He is attempting to modernize an institution that has survived for centuries precisely because it resists modernization. And now the woman he placed at the very center of his reign is no longer simply standing beside him. She is standing for herself. What most people don't yet realize is that the coming months will be decisive. Sources suggest that key decisions about the structure of the royal household, staffing, public engagements, and crucially the division of responsibilities between Charles and Camilla are currently being negotiated. Not publicly, not transparently, but in the quiet, unrecorded conversations that have always been how the British monarchy actually operates. But then there is the bigger picture that nobody wants to address directly. If Charles's health deteriorates further, the question of Camilla's role becomes not just personal, but constitutional. A queen consort operating independently is one thing. A queen consort stepping into a power vacuum is something else entirely. The palace knows this, Camilla knows this, and increasingly it appears that Charles knows it too. The monarchy has survived scandal before. It has survived divorce, abdication, and public fury, but it has never faced quite this combination: a vulnerable king, a newly assertive queen, and a watching world that is less willing than ever to simply trust the institution's word. So I ask you this: is Camilla right to assert herself at this critical moment? Or is she undermining the very king she vowed to support? And what does this mean for the future of a monarchy already walking a fragile line? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.